Many had lost hope. My hope was certainly waning, but the Big Ten is certainly playing football starting October 24th. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts on 247 Sports to help us break down the Big Ten's decision to finally tee it up in the fall. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good. We finally have a resolution here. It's been quite the roller coaster ride these last few months even, but yeah, we know that there's going to be football in the Big Ten, so you can consider me a happy camper because I'll get to cover it.
So we don't necessarily need to focus on the missteps. We can get right to what we can see right now would be an 8-game schedule. So in a sense, in leading up to this, most fans, players, coaches, so forth have obviously been against this. This has been a fight between that group and the presidents and what many would term the elite at the university level in regards to the relevance of football and whether it could be played safely. So the American way kind of won out. That's how I'll term it in this one. When you organize and are unified, make some noise, and pull together and do it in a concerted effort to fight against the system, I guess you can still make change.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what happened. We saw over the last month or so protests from parent groups. There was one at Ohio State. I believe there were some other ones across the country, and fans were involved there. Some parents even were at the Big Ten headquarters at one point. You know, you had Justin Fields creating a petition that got, I don't even know how many signatures by the time it was all said and done, but more than I think even Justin expected when he put that out there. There was, Twitter obviously was an abundance of people disagreeing with the Big Ten's decision, and people that, not just your average fan, but parents and players and coaches. Ryan Day put out a statement last week saying that, he was still disappointed with the communication from the Big Ten. James Franklin said something similar the same day on a radio interview. So it was, without going into too much of a mess, it was what it was. You certainly had people fighting back against the decision, and ultimately that won out. Now, the Big Ten wasn't ready to say that was the reason it won out. In fact, Kevin Warren said that while he appreciated the passion and knows that that's the fan base in the Big Ten and whatnot, but their stance is on, things changed. The information changed. The availability of rapid testing, which was the big thing, changed. And that is, according to the powers that be at the Big Ten, why they went from August 11th, no football, no sports, to today, September 16th, just over a month later, being able to play football and moving forward with other sports here down the line. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. If there wasn't as big of a uproar from people around the Big Ten probably doesn't focus as much on that, and maybe instead waits till the end of November or a January start date that we heard about before. But you also needed the rapid testing, and some of the other medical informations, the myocarditis stuff that was a big buzzword at the time of the Big Ten canceling, and more information was available now for that. So a lot of things played its part, but you certainly are right. The kind of American way, as you phrased it, definitely won out here.
I got to say that I will concede that the information and the cause or the reason for the reversal in the decision was more justified, at least on the surface, than I anticipated it was going to be if there was going to be a reversal of a decision. So regardless of where that lies, as you state, I'm with you. It's probably somewhere in the middle, whether it's 50-50 or 80-20 on either side. I think both were factors in regards to the hard data and the medical from the medical community and the pressure put on by various factions. So we've got an 8-game schedule. Can you kind of lay it out for us? I could, but you're going to do a better job, and then I'm going to maybe lay out a few issues that I see that are potential based on the delay.
Yes, the 8-game schedule is what they're going with. Apparently, the committee for scheduling, which is led by former Wisconsin head coach and current athletic director Barry Alvarez, presented 4 different options to the Big Ten that they deemed potentially doable. This is the one that they selected that starts on the weekend of October 24th. It sounds like there could even be games that Friday, October 23rd, maybe even the Thursday. We'll see what they actually do when a schedule is released, which should come out here in the next few days. It'll be an 8-game schedule starting that weekend, going all the way through to the Big Ten championship game on December 19th. In addition to the normal Big Ten championship game, the winner of the East versus the winner of the West, there will be these other kind of they're calling it championship week games played throughout that week leading up to the Big Ten championship game. So 2 versus 2 from the East versus the West, 3 versus 3, and so on and so forth, giving everybody in the conference 9 competitive games, as they phrased it, to play. Now, I don't know what pitfalls you are going to point out, but the biggest one for me when I saw that was the fact that the Big Ten originally came out with a schedule with a lot of flexibility. There was room to cancel games if needed, reschedule games. The schedule kind of folded over on itself, so teams had similar off weeks, and it was kind of a nice little jigsaw puzzle that was going to allow for potential hiccups caused by COVID-19 if there's outbreaks and for some reason a team can't play one week. This schedule doesn't have that. You're basically, if you want to be done by the college football playoff selection date, which is December 20th, the day after the championship game, you're going to have to play straight through for the most part. Now, how many games do you have to complete before the college football playoff committee? And, that's only some teams that are obviously going to be in contention, but the top teams in the Big Ten certainly want to be involved in that. How many games you have to play is not a set in stone. If maybe Ohio State ends up only playing 6 regular season games and a conference championship game because 2 get canceled or something, could the committee still select them? Probably, but we don't know. The nice thing is that the committee is very aware that this is a strange year. We don't know, just because the SEC has a 10-game schedule, and I use the SEC as an example, doesn't mean the SEC champion is going to have 10 games plus a conference championship game on their schedule. There could be games postponed and not played in there. So the committee is going to be flexible on that, which is good news for a team like Ohio State. It's going to be very interesting to see how this works. They believe in the testing that they have, that they can, this rapid testing that will be done daily, that they can keep what they termed as a clean playing field so that there won't be any issues. But as we've seen with this virus, with the pandemic, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow, much less, come December when you're trying to play football. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out.
So we've had players opt out from just about every team in the Big Ten. Some of them have opted back in. We just learned Shaun Wade and Wyatt Davis are back in play for Ohio State. So that's obviously a good thing. And there were basically 2 reasons why players would opt out. Number 1 would be medical concerns. Number 2 would be the medical concerns combined with the delay of the season, and then saying, okay, I'm ready to be eligible for the NFL draft. I'm at that level of play. So this may not affect the Buckeyes in particular, but there's still a few Big Ten teams out there that may not have had these players opt out, let's say, a month ago. So that's one issue that the Big Ten's delay has caused for some teams. The other one is, just to extend your point about the flexibility of the schedule, with every passing day, with every passing week, the Big Ten delayed this. They box themselves into a schedule situation in which we've seen, based on my count, and this is certainly not official, but I looked at the schedule for the first 2 weeks of the season in the college football schedule, and I've counted, I believe both weeks had 4 postponements or cancellations of games out of roughly 23, 24 games. So that's about 8 out of 50 games. So there's a pretty high probability that something's going to be canceled at some point. And then, as you mentioned, there's got to be a threshold there in the evaluation process for the College Football Playoff Committee to say, this was only 7-0, but it was a dominant 7-0, and it's Ohio State. They're going to be in the playoff. Let's put them in. Versus a 6-1 versus a 10-1 in another conference. And even though maybe this conference is better, the Big Ten has basically put themselves at a disadvantage in the evaluation.
And what a surprise! The Big Ten, the first team to go to 9 conference games, and that hasn't always been an advantage to them. So. It's funny that is the situation yet again. I think this is going to have to be a year where the eye test really comes into play. You know, because teams, you know, there was no non-conference, so you didn't have any games where you could say, all right, Ohio State played Oregon and won that game, for example. And, you know, these teams from this conference, and kind of, even though it's not quite fair from those 3 or 4 weeks to really stack up where the conferences stand, at least it gives you some idea outside of conference play. This year, you're not going to have that. You only have conference games for the most part. You're going to see these teams, you know, face from relatively familiar opponents, instead of being tested by teams where they don't know as much. So that part of it's going to be interesting. And then, like we just said, some teams may play a different number of games. So I think as long as you see, and I say this for every conference, not just the Big Ten, in my mind, 6 games, 7 games, somewhere in there seems to be right about the right number minimum in the regular season. And then obviously I think conference championship is going to be important here. You don't have the Pac-12 playing, you know, unless something very much changes out there. So you have 4 Power 5 conferences to sort of build towards your 14 playoff. Now, there's obviously a group of 5 teams that would like to get in the mix and felt like they had a good shot when the Big Ten was still out of this. And I think that those teams need to be considered as much as they ever are, if not more. And, you know, that's where, you know, things become even more challenging. Well, how do you compare, you know, a Big Ten champion, you know, a 6-1, 7-1, whatever Big Ten champion to a group of 5 team that played really well and ran through its whole schedule? You know, they pay those people much more money than I make to make those calls. But one quick thing I wanted to clarify: you mentioned the guys opting out and back in. Wyatt Davis and Shaun Wade haven't officially announced anything yet. There have been reports I saw on Wyatt Davis. Shaun Wade, I've heard good things in terms of him coming back, but nothing official here. What I would say on both of them is these are guys that wanted to play, wanted to, you know, both of them could have gone to the NFL draft last year and probably been high picks. They both have stated that they wanted to come back and win a national championship. You know, Shaun Wade has won every level of football he's played in, except at college thus far. So these guys wanted to play. They were both voted captains. When we talked to them, I believe it was August 4th, they were, you know, very adamant about playing. You could tell, all the captains, but these 2 guys, just because we're talking about them in particular. So it would not surprise me at all if those guys are back in the fold for Ohio State, especially because they just announced within the last 5 days, I think, Wyatt Davis last Friday, which was the 11th, and Shaun Wade on Monday, which was the 14th, I believe. So both guys announced pretty close to this announcement by the Big Ten that they were declaring for the NFL draft. I think both guys realized, hey, if there's an announcement here soon, maybe I'll reverse course. And it would not surprise me if they do. Now, both guys also never came back to Ohio State. Shaun Wade's down in Jacksonville. Wyatt Davis is out in California. Ohio State, before last week, had voluntary workouts and then started mandatory workouts last Monday, I believe, which have been in shells and no pads. So, you know, because they were not sure, those guys weren't back on campus. But it would not surprise me if you find out here in the next day or so that both guys are either on their way back to Columbus or are already there and getting ready to play with their team for the season.
Thanks for the clarification there. Pat Murphy on the line with us from Bucknuts joins us on a regular basis to talk Ohio State football and, by extension, of course, the Big Ten and the huge decision by the conference to get the football season rolling here the weekend of October 24th. Basically, the last 2 points I'll make just to build on our schedule and resume discussion for the college football playoff would be, you know, we're used to seeing 12-0, 11-1, the shiny, nice looking record. But if Ohio State or fill in the blank, whomever, Penn State misses the Rutgers game, you know, it's the volume versus the quality of games. The Buckeyes typically, since they've been as good as they've been under Urban Meyer and Ryan Day, play 3 to 5 games that we would consider meaningful, you know, a check mark on the resume, versus missing the Rutgers game versus missing the Penn State game. We're talking about 2 different animals right there in regards to a resume. And then also, I know that the committee's not going to admit to this, and I wouldn't either, but the brand name and the talent on the team versus Northwestern gets hot, or presumed that it's a hot stretch for Northwestern. They win a Big Ten championship at 6-1. I don't think they're going to get quite the cachet or the consideration that a team stacked with NFL players is going to get.
I agree. And I think something to consider, from our perspective, that certainly isn't in the college football playoff selection committee handbook. And you would hope isn't in their mind if you are a Northwestern, to use your example, is ESPN, obviously a partner that plays a part with the college football playoff. They lost a lot of money this offseason with none of the normal sports that take place. The NBA came back, which helps, and there's been some other stuff that they've done to kind of compensate that. But you obviously want the 4 best teams. But if ESPN can get the 4 most watched teams as well, that works for everybody. Everybody's got a little piece of that pie. So, in an ideal scenario, I think you have an undefeated Ohio State, an undefeated Alabama, an undefeated Clemson, and an undefeated either Oklahoma or Texas. And maybe you could substitute Michigan for Ohio State or LSU. There are certainly teams, but those are 4 of the big ones that would really draw. But you make a good point. If things get complicated, if Ohio State slips up, there's not going to be a lot of room for error, not only from the medical side, but you don't have as many games to kind of show that, hey, that was just one bad week. And we've seen Ohio State, lose bad games before that cost them a shot. If you have that happen in a couple conferences and all of a sudden, the marquee names maybe aren't the obvious choice, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Again, I think that you have it made easier because there are 4 conference champions for 4 spots in terms of Power 5. But, crazy things happen in college football. We've seen it before with the playoff. Ohio State obviously has gotten in as a non-conference champion. It's happened in the SEC as well. So it's going to be very interesting. And Notre Dame is another factor that hasn't made the playoff yet, but this year they're taking part in the ACC. So they'll run that ACC schedule, which means they're going to get to play Clemson. If you have a very close game against Clemson, say one team wins in a narrow margin, and maybe the Big Ten champion is a Northwestern that's not as sexy of a team and maybe didn't look as dominant throughout the schedule, but goes in there with a 7-1 record and wins. Do you consider taking a Notre Dame with 1 loss to Clemson, didn't win the conference champion, but looked good in every other game, for example? So it's going to be as complicated of a season of a college football playoff selection committee. All of this is going to be complicated. It's going to be unprecedented. Hopefully it's safe, and hopefully we have a lot of fun watching, covering all of it.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall to see Ryan Day's reaction. Maybe it wasn't that much external, but internal. Man, that guy just has a passion to win football games, knows he's got a great team, great talent, and really wanted to coach this season. And I'm not discounting the fervency in the other fan bases and teams and coaches, because Scott Frost, Jim Harbaugh, James Franklin, others have certainly been vocal. But focusing on Ohio State and Ryan Day, he certainly wants to play this football season. There's no question about that, Pat.
For sure. And, he talked the day after the Big Ten announced the cancellation, that he was going to get emotional on the Zoom call we were on because this was a special team. And he said he felt it from the moment they reported for winter conditioning. These guys were motivated because of that loss to Clemson last year, because of how it worked with the controversial calls and the throw at the end of the game that was intercepted. All of that had fueled these guys, because a lot of these guys played in that game. I mean, they were key parts. There were some guys that left, obviously, but most of these guys were key contributors that are back this year. They felt they not only had the talent, the motivation, the leadership, all these things Ryan Day mentioned. They get through winter workouts. He was really happy with the freshmen that came in and the young guys that were stepping up. You start spring practice and all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under you. And, everyone understood why that was. And it was just unfortunate. But at that point, you expect, all right, we'll get to fall. We're going to be able to play. They come back for, various forms of summer workouts, and as much as they were allowed to do, they start ramping up to get ready to get in pads, and then the Big Ten cancels. So, yeah, this was hard on everyone, but Ryan Day and these players certainly felt the brunt of it. They like I said, he felt like this is a special team. He was going to coach whatever team. If it was in January, if it was in the spring, he was going to coach it. He mentioned that he was going to coach that whatever team as hard as he could to get them ready, even if it was a spring season. But you could tell that the championship was what Ryan Day wants to win, wants to compete for this year. And the Buckeyes think they have the talent, the motivation, the leadership, as I said, to be there in the end. And, it looks like now they're going to get that opportunity.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share the videos on social media, and subscribe right here. Pat Murphy joining us from Bucknuts. Pat, we know that on a day like today, you're running all over the place trying to track down the various storylines in a historic day for the Big Ten. So thank you so much for stopping by and providing your insight.
For sure. I'll always make time for you, Mark.